Technology, eh? Ladies and gentlemen, we are here for a very special Bald and Bonkers. I know the man below us looks an awful weird to be named Fiona, but he was having some technical issues and had to borrow his lady's equipment. Welcome, Neil Storey. And my God, the conversations we were having just before we decided to finally pop on here, or someone will shut up.
I can't help.
Thank you.
I would honestly like to say,
one.
Neil, I would honestly like to say, Neil, thank you so much for coming on. As obviously I seen you that night in Dave Schrader's show. Brilliant show. If anybody's watching it, please check it out. But honestly, that was when you were telling the stories, when you were telling it was really creepy, right? And I was sitting in a dark room and I thought, I need to get this guy on. It was the most creepy. It was just it was weird. And I'm going to bring up, you're an author. You've got multiple books. How many books have you got exactly?
Well, I've written on things that have always interested me. It might be classified as dark history. Yeah. In total, there are 50 books, and they look at the things that shape our modern world. It's crime, medicine, and warfare, with a liberal dash of the paranormal and ghosts in there as well.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm looking at some of your books now, and one of them sits out to me, and I would like to ask you a wee bit about it, because I've got grandparents that were in the war, and it's called The Blackout Murders, because that's your new book that's one of your new books that you've just brought out, isn't it?
You're absolutely right, and that's coming out next year, January. So you are the very first interview about that, and it struck me that there's talk of the Blackout Ripper, Gordon Cummins in London. You'll hear a lot about him. Mm-hmm. But there was a crime wave in the blackout. You've got to imagine this. It's 1939 for us in Britain when war is declared, September. And we're straight in with blackouts. And shop owners and businesses and the police were saying, look, if we start going into blackout, it's going to be a criminal's paradise.
Oh, yeah.
But the air raid precautions people quite rightly said, well, if we don't go into blackout, they're going to see all the lights. We're going to be a sitting duck and they're going to bomb the places flat. And that was a genuine concern. So they had to go into blackout. And it was a golden opportunity for lots of people who'd always thought, ooh, could I be a criminal? Could I really? And in wartime situations, people do things. They'll do extraordinarily brave things. They, to help their comrades, to help their neighbors on the front line and at home when we're facing bombing. But very sadly, you will also see some of the darkest sides of human nature. So there's books about crime in wartime, and there's sort of the ideas of these spivs. And for our American friends, you might not know what spivs are, but they're very similar to gangsters. They were selling nylons and ucky bows and things you couldn't. A lot of things were rationed in Britain.
Yes.
So they were selling those. But my book is not about that. My book is about people that literally they've either snapped, or they're bad, or they're mad. And believe you me, you have to almost in a Twilight Zone introduction think.
Yeah.
If you, like some people in London, were exposed to night after night of bombing, now we're talking night after night, over 2 months, and you don't know history. We know it's going to stop. They don't. So some people snapped.
Yeah, I mean,
if you snapped, what would
I've heard.
You do?
I've heard the stories. My grandparents have told the stories about the bombers flying over, and you could see, I'm talking Glasgow, and you could see the bombs falling.
Absolutely.
And because they're in the countryside, it wasn't really affecting them. But it was the devastation that people must have went through, the stress. It must have been hell.
So you find there's a case of one woman, for example, and she had a husband that had sadly lost his eyesight. It had gradually deteriorated. He was completely blind. Their house had a very near hit, got severe blast damage, and they had to go and live with a sister-in-law.
Yeah.
This guy's, he's sat on they're having to sleep on the floor of the front room. And his wife, and they're still London's still being bombed, and she snaps, and she thinks the kindest thing to do is to take an axe to him and hack him to death. Yeah, you got an air raid.
I had some crazy women.
Well, it happened. You've got an air raid warden that saw people down the shelters every night. He didn't want his mother to go through that, so he strangled her to death.
Oh my God!
But you have to remember, you see, in 1939, thousands of animals, beloved pets, were put to death because they didn't think that they could take cats, dogs.
That's right. I've heard that.
Feathered friends down into air raid shelters. So it was a mass cull on an assumption, really. They didn't think that they'd have the food to feed the animals either because it would be rationed. So life in some ways became very cheap. But that's not the only murders. You see some of the most infamous murders in the history of Britain, serial killers like John Haig, the acid bath murderer.
Yep.
He begins in wartime London because he's got the cover of darkness to take people down to his workshop, shoot them or thump them across the head with a lead pipe, and then put them into acid vats. Trouble is, at that time, he hadn't really thought it through about the vapours. So he has to scuttle upstairs to keep getting fresh air and leave the door open. So he's able to do that under the cover of darkness. Reg Christie, 10 Rillington Place. He's enticing women, back to his house, and he's giving them a noxious inhaler. But what's he doing with the bodies? He's putting them originally in the garden.
Yes, I found that very interesting. That because they actually made a movie out of that.
They did.
I can't remember the actor that played it. But he done a.
Was it Tim Roth?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, because at the very end of the movie, I don't want to spoil this for them, but at the very end of the movie, there's a new couple moves in, and they're redecorating the house, and they pull a panel off.
That's right.
And there's bodies everywhere, basically.
It was a gentleman. I think he was on the Windrush or one of the early folks from foreign parts from the West Indies. His name was Beresford Brown, and he'd got actually permission to put up a radio in the kitchen. Thought, oh, that's really nice. So these buildings had layer upon layer of wallpaper. These are the grottiest places, and they're worth a fortune now. They've all been restored.
Oh yeah.
But in those days, this is super down at heel, hard up into London. So he's tapping the wall. Oh, this bit's hollow. What's that? Pulls the paper aside. But that's because there's no more blackouts. So Christie started putting these bodies into this kind of pantry come alcove in the side of the kitchen. If he'd killed all of those women in wartime, and the thinking is he probably did kill others.
Yeah.
You could this is the thing, you could ditch bodies amongst the rubble. You've got the Blackout Ripper, but there were others that did a similar thing to that as well. Oh God, there's one called the Blackout Butcher.
I've heard it. I mean that's terrible. I mean, you think about it. You're the police. You come up to a burning building with rubble lying everywhere. You see a body lying. You've got to think they must have died in that building. You're not going to think, oh, there's somebody gassed them and strangled them.
Yeah.
And of course, if you give somebody a blow to the head with a lead pipe, and if you've got the cover of darkness, I mean, the crazy thing is, Christie had a record before World War II, petty swindler, horrible stuff. He'd also assaulted one of his ex-partners, vicious, horrible man. But when war came along, he volunteered as a war reserve constable in the Metropolitan Police. Yeah. So he gets a police uniform. It was a dream cover for him.
It's absolute madness. Actually brings us on to the other book. Now, obviously, you're telling us about how Dave seen this book, The Dracula, The Secrets of Jack the Ripper. I mean, I've always been fascinated with Jack the Ripper. I've always wondered who was he? Why did he do it? Was he a doctor? Who was this? Could you fill us in on that?
Well, there are many candidates. Well, I don't think we'll ever know for 100% for the satisfaction of a court of law. But anybody that studied it seriously will probably have a candidate that they think is a highly likely one. So, I won't just give you my highly likely suspect. I will give you the highly likely suspect named by Britain's Special Branch Senior Officer, right? Chief Inspector Littlechild. So you imagine all of the other officers, Scotland Yard, Metropolitan Police, even the Commissioner, there was very few of those that lingered long after 1888. Littlechild was in position, very senior officer in Special Branch, before, during, and after the Jack the Ripper crimes. His number one suspect that he named was Dr. Francis Tumblety. Now, Francis Tumblety was an Irish-born emigre to America, where he was in New York, and he sort of was a young man there exposed to pornography and all sorts of things going on by the river. He never really qualified as a doctor. He gets into quack medicine and makes a fortune with Dr. Tumblety's pimple banisher. But he has got a venereal disease. He's got an absolutely dreadful, a vicious hatred of women. And he even has a collection of, and this is attested by a number of witnesses. If you went to have dinner with Dr. Tumblety, he had a cupboard filled with specimen jars of women's uterus.
Oh my God.
And he used those to explain why women are disgusting. He was a man, apparently he could disguise himself to cross borders. And he got himself into bother in Canada, in the USA, and he regularly used to come, when it got a bit hot in the States, came back to Ireland and to the UK. The timing is absolutely right. We know 100% that he was in London in 1888. He has the profile that works. And interestingly, there's been great research carried out in America. We always knew that it would be a transatlantic case, that it would take people both sides of the Atlantic. Wonderful Mike Hawley, a dear friend of mine, but there are others as well, Roger Palmer, Joe Giacuti, wonderful guys out there, Tim Reardon, absolutely great guys, and more. I don't wish to do a disservice because I know there's a lot of very serious interest. And of course, the man that discovered the original letter that named Tumblety as a suspect, my dear friend, Stuart P. Evans. So there's a lot of people on this case, but the more you dig, the more you find. And out in the States, there are murders taking place on the doorstep of where Tumblety was after his return in 1888. He is the only suspect that the more you dig, the more you find that points the finger at him being Jack the Ripper.
I mean, it must have been psychotic to actually do this. I mean, I don't know what must have been running through his mind, to be honest with you. I mean,
there is an indication from the letters. Now, I was very fortunate to have a lead. And the lead was that Tumblety was a great friend of Thomas Henry Hall Caine. In fact, there is something to intimate that they had a very intimate relationship. But of course, in those days, if it was a homosexual relationship, that was against the law. Think of the trial of Oscar Wilde, for example. But there is an indication that there was that kind of a relationship, or at least that's what Tumblety felt. And they spoke of spending whole nights together and all sorts. So it's intimate. The letters had to be held back for many years because it was in a huge archive, the Hall Caine archive on the Isle of Man. They couldn't be released due to sensitive family information. They had to, out of respect, just wait for a family member to pass away, and then they could all be released. It then took 10 years for those letters to be put out to public access because it wasn't just Tumblety and Hall Caine. There's Dante Gabriel Rossetti. There's Wilkie Collins, author of The Woman in White. There's a whole host of incredible letters. Henry Irving, the greatest actor of his day, and letters with his dear friend, Hall Caine's dear friend, Bram Stoker. So hence we end up with the Dracula Secrets, because Tumblety and Hall Caine are corresponding, and you see the anger in Tumblety in those letters, his hatred of women. And I was really lucky that, having watched year after year after year, the year they were due for release, I went over to the Isle of Man. Wendy Thurkett, a wonderful lady at the Isle of Man archives, there was one box to go through, the last box, and we went through it together. So I know I was the first person outside the archives ever to see the entirety. There's 60 odd letters, and I was expecting maybe 10 or 20, 60 odd letters, plus telegrams. And I thought, the writing on these, it's different. Why is it? Is he dictating? Because Tumblety was a great one for associating with other young men, and he would give dictation. I sent those letters, a sample of them, to a forensic document examiner. So this isn't just a graphologist. This woman, Ruth Myers, incredibly talented lady, is on the register of, she's an expert witness, internationally regarded. So the notable cases in British history that she's been involved with, current. But I asked her to apply her skills to these letters that I sent through. And they're all in the same hand of the same man. But it is his utter split personality that enables, and that really is utterly split personality, multiple personalities.
I just can imagine what that guy must have been like in real life. I mean, scary.
Very scary man indeed.
Yeah.
But he's my number one suspect. I'll go with Little Child. I'll go with Special Branch, because if you remember the film with Johnny Depp, the late great Robbie Coltrane says, you don't with Special Branch, because Special Branch will with you. That's cleaned up for a family audience.
Yeah, I found that movie was quite intriguing. The one
it was. I mean, it's not quite loyal to the tale. They blacken the name of William Withy Gull, the Queen's surgeon, one of the greatest surgeons of his day, a man that helped to understand mental illness like no other in his day. So it's very sad that he's got drawn into, and his name really does need to be cleared.
Yeah. It's you got to remember
they didn't have Tumblety. Now that would have been the film.
that would have been the film. That would have been the film, because they didn't have technology. They didn't do fingerprints. They didn't have DNA. I mean, if that had to happen nowadays, I mean, the DNA, the CTV cameras, I mean, they would eventually. Wouldn't it take them long? They would track you down.
We'd hope so. We would hope so. But I believe in America, was it the Green River Killer eluded capture for quite some long period of time, into quite recent time period.
Yeah.
The BTK guy as well. These guys, even with all of this modern technology, if they're attacking in rural areas and they're transient characters, they're very hard to catch. And this is why Tumblety, he's a transient character going from country to country killing.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary to think that he was getting away with it for so long. And it's just, I mean, Jack the Ripper, do you think he maybe killed in the United States?
Yes. Oh, yes. But never to the degree of killing Mary Jane Kelly. The killing at Miller's Court in November 1888. If you ever see the photograph, and I advise people, even now, all these years on, if you see a high resolution image of what he did to that poor woman, the youngest of them all, it's one of the first ever crime scene photographs. I think one of the reasons why is because it was so horrific.
It's horrific. Yeah, I've seen that. I know the picture you're talking about. I've seen it, and as I don't know, Dakota, have you seen that picture?
I have.
Yeah.
Just
It's
the destruction of a woman. But you see, people will argue against Tumblety as a suspect because the homosexual serial killer of a woman is quite an unusual killer.
yeah.
But Dr. Rivers in America in the 1950s wrote a book called The Sexual Criminal. And he revealed some of the cases in the States where there had been exactly that. A homosexual serial killer of women, they are rare, but the destruction he wrought on those women's body, it's a terrible hatred.
Mm-hmm.
But what is interesting is the doctors did talk of some medical knowledge on the victims of Jack the Ripper. And I think if Tumblety was known as an abortionist, so if you had that degree of medical knowledge, I think it certainly shows that in the bodies of the victims building up to Mary Kelly. I realise it's very contentious. There's arguments for and against. But over my many years, my professional life as an academic, it doesn't necessarily make me any better or any worse than anybody else. But I have had the chance to talk to people who are training as surgeons and lecturing in surgery because I've lectured on the history of medicine. Some will completely dismiss it, rather like some guys will say that no policeman could ever kill. You know, for many years that was held, but it can happen.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's the same in the medical profession. Yeah. Nobody would want to think that a medical man, even today, could have carried out those crimes. But those that will say, well, look, he's working at speed and there is a methodology in what he is doing. The killer known as Jack the Ripper is opening a body and then removing the viscera so that he can get to the uterus and remove it.
Yes.
To remove a kidney. And to do that at speed, with minimal light, maybe a lantern in the dark corner of an alley or square, to me, for my money, and as I say, there will be people that can argue till they're blue in the face, and I respect them just as well.
Yeah.
For my money and for those that will look at it seriously, I think there had to be some medical knowledge. It all, for me, fits the profile of Francis Tumblety.
Do you think he had any help? Like, do you think he maybe had like a nobody like take the horse and carriage or no?
And the thing is, you see, they talk about a body being him being covered in blood. Well, the thing is, the nights are dark. There's quite a lot of people on the streets in those days. But if you are wearing a long black coat, not a cape but a top hat, although there would be a few of those around, but you're wearing a long black coat, just an ordinary hat, because everybody wore a hat in those days, the blood will be covered. You won't see it. Black gloves.
Good to remember it's Victorian London here and there's smog for all the coal burning plants and
on the nights of the Ripper murders, interestingly, there was no smog. Not a lot of people know. Now, I don't want to extinguish too many fires, but the truth is, no smog.
That's very interesting.
Clear nights. But they were nights when there were there's plenty of people on the street. When you see these films and documentaries, they often show empty streets. But no, you've got to remember the East End of London was the place where people would often go after they've been to the music hall. Even those that like to go to the posher theatres used to like to go and rough it in the East End. And maybe some of the toffs will have a punch up with the East End lads. Or that you'd catch a penny bus and have a look around. Because there'd always be something going, hot tatty sellers. And did you know that on the streets of the East End, you couldn't really sleep there easily because the police would move you on. So you would have to do what you call carrying the banner. So you walk through the night, you talk, you see. In the daytime, that's when they would go to places like Itchy Park. Now, Itchy Park was right near Christchurch, and all their clothes that had kind of got wet, the coat, They'd just keep decent. But if they got a wet coat and a wet cap, they'd be on the railings all around the church, near the of the park near the churchyard. That's why it was called Itchy Park. That's when they could sleep in the daytime.
I must have a day like Victorian London. It's got like a kind of atmosphere there. I wished I had a time machine. I wished I could go back and see it. You know, because can you imagine the atmosphere? I mean, their technology then was a steam engine. I think that was that. They didn't. It was. Oh, it's just the atmosphere is so interesting. Dakota, would you like to ask?
It's just it certainly brings it a lot into perspective because you see the world that is nowadays, and everybody constantly on edge because some sort of new doom and gloom. It's just like this stuff has always been around.
Yeah,
and like you say, nobody wants to think that something terrible is going on, but let's take the latest craze of selling feet pictures online. There's apparently an active killer out there right now here in the States who is finding young girls, chopping their feet off. I won't mention what speculated he's doing with them, and calling police dispatch centers, bragging about doing this stuff with the sounds of a woman drowning in the background.
Good God.
Authorities are fairly certain they know who it is, but they can't get enough on him to arrest him. Yeah. And I was about to say, people say, no, there's no way this can happen. I think what's the official FBI statistic? There's at least 50 active serial killers at any given moment.
Yeah.
You never know.
It's the terrifying thing and it's true. And if you look at the missing persons statistics, they are hair-curlingly frightening. Now, a lot of these missing persons do turn up one way or another. They've wanted to go away. They've run away. They all turn up. But there are quite a shocking statistic that don't, which means that there will be completely undetected serial killers that have been active for forever.
Yeah.
Some will be brand new. Mm-hmm. So we mustn't dwell too much on that.
Yes, in case they take interest. Well, if you want to visit my friend Dakota, he lives in the United States.
Well, the land of Zodiac. That's all I can say.
Exactly. There's one other book before we jump into the kind of more paranormal kind of stuff. There's one other book that I see here, and I'm intrigued, but I'm going to buy it because I just like the title, "The Little Book of Death." Can you tell us a little
I shouldn't laugh at such a thing.
I was about to say, this just got dark.
Well, it's true. And it's the book it's the one certainty in everybody's life that I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said there's only two certainties, death and taxes. And that's pretty much But I've collected ephemeral things. I've been very lucky. I've been able to collect a book collection of several thousand books now, and they're old almanacs and guides and directories where nobody wanted them really, and very little was online. And I've always collected cuttings of strange deaths, like Joe Pooley Newman, the American jazz saxophonist that decided that his manhood was waning. And he takes so much of the, it's a stimulant for that region that men like to have. They like to have a little tablet to help them if there's performance issues. And he thought, I'll really go for this. He takes so much of it that his penis explodes and he bleeds to death. What a way to go!
That can happen.
Damn right.
Can that actually happen?
Damn right. It did. So that's what the whole book is about: is crazy deaths, death rights.
I gotta get this book.
There's a woman in America. She dies from some sort of toxic poisoning because a raccoon dies in her chimney, and it means that it gets a back blow. I mean, all sorts of stupid things that can happen to people.
I need to buy this book. I need to buy this book.
One of the guys on the Everest expedition he's gone up Everest, right? The very first with Edmund Hillary. He's all part of that team. He's done the big one, right? He dies falling off a stool, changing a light bulb. There you go. He busts his leg on the way down there, and the shock kills him.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard these strange things like that happen. I mean, my grandfather, my great grandfather was in World War I, right? He survived it from 1916 to 1918, right? The entire war. He came home. He got a job up near Oban in Scotland, and it's a power station that was getting built in Loch. It's built under the mountain, and a slab of rock the size of a double-decker bus landed on top of him. And
when it's your time, it's your time.
It's your time. It's your time. I mean, it's just crazy. But that with the Viagra, that's a new one that I'm going to be thinking of.
Wow.
Sometimes, you know, if you, and you'll know this, Dakota, from your time on the force, and you know, if you've ducked a few shells in your time or whatever you're doing in any of the military forces or just in life, if you've been lucky to survive some pretty traumatic things. Yeah. But some people can say it's a gallows humor, it's soldiers humor, but
oh yeah,
it's what gets you through, and it's the sort of book that makes you think, Christ, I'm glad that didn't happen to me. And you know, what else can you do?
I'm buying it. I'm buying that. I'm buying that for Christmas. That's that. I'm going to order that tonight. I need some light reading, you know, for at night.
Seriously, I judge my friends where they keep my books, the number of pals that have that in their toilet, so that when they are contemplating the world, they've got death on the job.
I mean,
I know.
I've heard some crazy stuff. Oh, wow.
But I would like to ask you, Neil, about your paranormal experiences. How did you get into all this kind of stuff? How did you get into the paranormal field? Curiosity.
I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, obviously it's not the Viagra one that got
but later life, it's certainly grown on me. But when I was a kid, I grew up in a very old county called Norfolk. It's got the greatest concentration of medieval churches in Northern Europe, which means we've got the greatest concentration of medieval churchyards in Northern Europe. And add to that, headless horsemen, white ladies, ghoulies, ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and a storytelling tradition that goes back to the Anglo-Saxons. It's haunted, believe you me. So I grew up with those stories. I grew up in a town called North Walsham, and there was a story on one of the hills near there, on one of the roads, that if you cycle really fast, breakneck speed, in those days there wasn't that much traffic on the roads. If you cycle so fast, you'll actually be taken off the road. You'll be drawn up into the air. Now, that's a weird thing. You think, now, that's just somebody telling you that, so you slow down. Well, as I was a lad growing up, this was, in some ways, you get told ghost stories, but it was really my first investigation, I suppose, as a kid. Just wondering, is it true? And if you think about it, maybe that's how a lot of people start as a ghost investigator, as a kid, because we want to know, is that story of that white woman in the haunted house down the road, is that true? Well, I think this would be my first. And I started talking to local people. I grew up a lot with my grandparents, so I talked to their friends. And there's a wonderful old boy called Joe Bush. He used to play town for North Walsham Football Club in the 1920s. He was a bit of a football legend, even when I knew him in the late 70s, early 80s. Family friend, dear old boy, very tall. And of course, being the young lad I was, Joe, did you ever cycle really fast up this certain road? Well, yes, boy. And he said, you know what happened then, don't you? I said, no. He said, I felt lifted off. I left the road. I said, Joe, he said, the mist come all round me. And Joe was a nice boy. He would tell you a little joke. He'd tell you a funny story because you were a kid. But there was something about that. Joe said, yeah, that happened to me. Now, here's the twister. All round that area of North Walsham and round towards Cromer, that story existed for a lot of years, right?
Yeah.
In 1969, and I won't name this young lady because she's got living family there, but if you want to dig, you'll find her case.
Right.
she set off from her home in a little village not that far away to go and see her sister her older married sister. She was a teenage girl, to go to the next village, right? The cycle ride would have taken 10 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
She was seen about 5 minutes from her home by some friends that were seeing a little donkey in a field. This is open field land, right? Don't have a lot of hills in Norfolk, but this is over hills. Between seeing those kids and the donkey and over the brow of the hill, she disappears. And in fact, not only does she disappear, her bicycle is found on a field. And according to the reports, and Richard Whittington Egan, an old friend of mine, he researched it. He was part of it. He was a very good, he was a crime historian, a good newspaper man. I've spoken to the investigating officers. Her bicycle was found over a verge too far for anybody to throw it.
Okay, that's what happened to her.
So was she
go
drawn off the
else?
ground?
Yeah.
The cycle drops, and she's never seen again. That sounds like, in fact, I'm going to put it out there, all right, because people will disbelieve it. And I'll say this with respect, because if this ever leads to finding somebody that did abduct and kill this young lady, we want to find that person because they deserve to be punished. But if there's something more to it, a paranormal reason, then maybe we can try and bring some peace to her remaining family members. Her name was April Fab. Because there are many spurious stories you'll hear about such things. Look up the story of April Fab.
I've heard that name before.
I've heard this one.
Yeah.
I mean, and what do you think actually happened to her? Do you think she was like maybe sucked into like a different time zone? Or that's scary. To think you could be just walking along a road and just disappear. I mean, I've heard like David Paulides, and he talks about the people that's been into the woods, and in front of them there's been people, and behind them there've been people, and they looked away for a split second, and the person in the middle just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
That's...
If it gets the case thought about and brought into people's minds, if somebody does know the truth, Norfolk Police still has that file open. But if there is a mystery to it, then we need to be aware if there is another dimension to it. There are thousands of people that go missing every single year. Where do they go?
That's a good question. You just need to look at like the national parks in America with David Paulides, so the thousands of people that just disappear.
Absolutely.
Where did they go? Did they get abducted?
Yeah.
That's the whole conspiracy, is that the National Park Service was founded to protect those lands, not necessarily, as nature reserves, but because, I believe it was Theodore Roosevelt, avid outdoorsman, he knew something was out there, and if people found it, there would be trouble.
These are the mysteries of this world, and I think it is a dreadful conceit to think we all know how dimensions work.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a crazy theory. I really think we need it needs. So many people in the scientific world just dismiss the paranormal.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
And the chances of there being dimensions, people disappearing. But then again, the more you explore in science, the less we find we know. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I was inspired many years ago by a man called Arthur C. Clarke. And when I was a kid, he's the man that he really kind of mapped out the idea for the telecommunication satellite. He was a brilliant man. But in the 1980s, there was a series called Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. And it used to start with this vision of Stonehenge and a crystal skull.
Yes.
And they would go and investigate these incredible stories all around the world. He went to Sri Lanka in the end, and that's where he was in retreat pondering these mysteries. And I would never want to hurt anybody in this world, I hope to make this world a better place, but I hope that to explore its mysteries with respect and respect to each other, that's the journey I hope to carry on doing for the rest of my days.
Well, I hope you continue to keep writing, because I can't wait to buy the Little Book of Death, because I think that's going to be an awesome read. Can I ask you, what kind of paranormal experiences have you had? Have you ever witnessed spirits? What's the best one you've ever had?
For a lot of years, I used to say I've seen things that I can't explain.
Yeah.
But I have. Now I'm a certain age in life, and I'm actually quite happy to say I've seen things I cannot explain, and I've seen what, if we want to label it a ghost, yes, I think I've seen ghosts. I've certainly seen paranormal activity, the like of which that convinces me that there is something more, quite what it is, and I can't explain what I've seen. Okay, so what have you seen, Neil Storey? One of my first ever proper investigations, as such, as much as a teenager with access to, do you remember early video recorders? Do you remember those? It looks like a TV camera, old styly, on your shoulder with a brick you push in the side.
My dad used to have one.
Do you remember those? Yeah, that's a bad boy piece.
My dad used to have a big one, and you had to wear like a rocks battery at the side.
Dead right. Yeah. You can always tell a real ghost hunter of any year's standing if their first investigations are recorded on Betamax. Yeah. What do we got? I'm at college. It's 1980s in Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, England. Very pretty girl from the hairdressing department comes. You're in that ghost hunting group, aren't you? Yeah. And I'm all right. I'm a geek. It's what I am. It's what I do. Yeah. She said, no, seriously, our house is haunted. Okay. Well, what is it? And apparently, when terraced houses in Great Britain, they used to be kind of divided downstairs. You'd have like a parlour and a dining room. And quite often, they knock them through, so you have one big room. And there's lots of houses that were student accommodation like that in Yarmouth. And the girls would say they'd be sat in the front part of the room watching TV, and where they'd eat their meal, where they have the table, they would see something past them, like a black shape. So, because they've only got a lamp in the front. What is that? Back room, they've got the table where they do their dressmaking and all sorts for the fashion studies. And then one night, one of the girls was downstairs with her boyfriend. It was dark. They were together. And she kind of felt something was watching them. Where they had not a comfortable feeling. They were having some intimate time together. She broke away. She turned around. And in front of the bay window, it was dark outside, but there was a shape that was darker than the darkness. So there must have been some sort of maybe a street light nearby or some moon. You could see that, but there's something there. And its shape, she said, I'm telling you, it looked like a monk. Or somebody with their hood up and a cloak. It was a shape. She said, I didn't see it very long, and it just went, and it was blacker than black. And that's what really freaked her out and what got her to speak to me. So I went with a couple of pals, got what equipment we could from back in the day, borrowed from college. We've got a mercury thermometer, digital thermometer. We put controls up in the room, for example, the cotton and the bit of tape, just stop. There's no one messing about, So we've locked down, cameras on. And of course, you've got to keep changing the cassette over. Nothing going on. 1 o'clock in the morning, the temperature, everything drops and everything goes out, which is odd because you could hear the fridge in the kitchen, which is the next room back, because you've got lounge, diner, the kitchen's on the little extension at the back. that fridge is still buzzing. The electricity's just gone out in the main bit.
Ooh,
and we don't
okay,
need
right.
to go into the fuse box to trip it back on again. It comes back on. But what is weird is it surges back on slowly.
Wow.
And it's deadly cold.
That's
Huh.
that's yeah.
I've never seen anything quite like that. But here's the twister.
It was like slowly turning the power up.
Well, it's the strangest thing. And then and then there was nothing more. Come the morning, we go outside because we've got all of our lovely light equipment with us. Battery pack, cassettes, big old camera, tripod, dum, outside the door. Yeah. It's on a Yale lock, so you pull the door closed, bang. Now everybody's out. The two girls, my two mates and me. Everybody's on the pavement, door shut. Inside, bang.
Wow.
And we thought, hello? Maybe
okay.
the dressmaker's dummy inside where they've got, they used to build the dresses up on it. Maybe that's fallen over. So we go inside. My mate goes straight upstairs. I turn left. I'm in the lounge. Now, I'm sure that no matter how loving and happy anybody's family is, everybody disagrees now and again. And if you walk in a room, and you've had an argument, there's a bit of an atmosphere going on.
Yes.
Well, there was no, and you'd know if someone's sat in there, you've had an argument with them, you can sense. Well, that room, there's nobody in there, but you could cut that atmosphere like a knife.
Yeah.
It was anger. Dressmaker's dummy still standing there. The room is absolutely fine. Nothing, didn't notice anything missing. But the door, these are those kind of fiber doors when they often have in student accommodation. Do you know? Two pieces of wood.
I know what you're talking about.
And they've got the card in between. So they're not as solid as you'd hope them to be. But it's flat against the wall. And I don't know why. Even to this day, I don't know why. Because it's flat against the wall. I thought, I'll have a look. I'll have a look behind that door.
Oh, dear.
So I pulled it. I looked behind that door, and there was a pair of dressmaking shears stuck into the door.
Oh my God. That's just terrifying, actually, to think that spirit did that.
The girls never went back in.
It must have been its favourite room.
It was absolutely crazy, and that's, to me, although I've seen all sorts over the years since, at that moment, that was my proof that the paranormal exists.
Oh yeah, it definitely exists.
Oh yeah,
it was 100%. That's in my face, and I've seen all sorts since, but I have never. It's your first, It's that moment of discovery that really is it. Here it is. No one else could have done that. Now, the interesting thing is that I worked at the museums as a young student lad, volunteering with the exhibitions. I did so for a number of years. They were doing a special exhibition about the monasteries of Great Yarmouth. So these are the old monastic houses, long gone, and some of them had houses built on top of them.
Yes.
And what we did was, back in those days, with lots of photocopies and a little bit of pen drawing, we overlaid the map of the monastery floor plans with the streets of Great Yarmouth. And I just thought when I was doing that, I wonder where that house was in relation to these. And oh, yes, it's over the monastery graveyard. Spot on.
Oh,
wow.
Why do people do that? Build over the top of these places? I mean, here in Scotland, I've heard that happen where they've built new council estates. And then you're like, people are like, I see strange apparitions. But then you start researching, you find out there'd been a monastery or a castle or a burial ground on the property. I mean, it's actually quite scary. It makes you think what's underneath your.
I've got involved in a number of investigations over the years, where people in very ordinary modern houses. My house is haunted. And in fact, the new series of Help My House is Haunted, episode 1. There I am with lovely Jane Harris and Barry Guy and a beautiful man called Ian Lawman, a gifted medium, really, and more than that, he's an ordained exorcist. He absolutely wonderful man, genuine. And there is a house in just outside Peterborough, an ordinary family, a good man, a family man. He was an ambulance driver. Young kids in the house, a happy family. I went in that house. I saw it myself. But it was haunted. And it was haunted by a demon. And they actually found it was a named demon. Now, I didn't know any of that when I was initially asked by the series. If it's the real tough ones, they call me because I've got a very good record because I don't guess. My experience is very much in historical records. And we found a centuries-old chronicle that spoke. It was the Peterborough Chronicle, and they spoke of what they called the demon hunt. The demon hunt, and it was all figures cowled in black, riding stallions, huge goats. But the figures were all cowled in black, the Black Hunt. And anciently, it ran from Stamford to Peterborough, and it went right through where these folks are living. And you think about an ancient demon, and you think that's gone in the past. But something was drawing them back to a very ordinary little house on the outskirts of Peterborough.
And I take it, did you manage to get rid of it, or did you manage to banish it from the property?
I told them the stories that we thought were connected. I did visit the property, but I was not there when they conducted the investigation because it's the usual team from the show of Barry, Ian, and Jane. And they did contact a demon. The demon. Now, can you imagine getting this on your Ovilus or whatever recording device that they were using?
Yeah.
The thing is coming through multi-bands, speaking backwards. It's on the TV show. You can see it.
I'm going to go and watch it, actually.
And it's a known demon that it gets into the bodies of the dead, actually. And I
think I know the one you're talking about.
Possesses them.
Yeah.
They cleanse the property. Now, Jane often uses the sage smudge. This one, she was using dragon's blood.
Yeah.
Needed it. And Ian Lawman laid that demon. It's to me, it's one of the most fascinating episodes, and I've been involved with the series since about series 2 of Help My House is Haunted. I've never seen anything quite like it as an episode.
I'm actually going to look that up tonight and watch it, because can you imagine what that thing? I'll just call it the thing, because I know if you name a demon, it can sometimes come back on you and stuff like that. But can you imagine what it was doing to that family? Can you imagine what it was putting them through?
It was talking to them. They had it on recording, and this poor. Can you imagine? This man's gone down into his ground floor. His daughter's been disturbed by hearing stuff downstairs, and all of the drawers, the cupboard doors, everything is open in the kitchen.
Oh my!
And when the dad goes down with his phone to record it, that's when the voice speaks, and they get the same voice on the recording devices of the Help My House is Haunted team. Just pulling all of those pieces together, to me, it's quality investigation.
It's scary.
It really is.
That is scary. I mean, I hope I never come in contact with a demonic demon. I hope I never do. I know they're rare. I know they're rare. But when you do come in contact, and Dakota here, I think Dakota's actually, you've done exorcisms. Dakota has done. I mean,
and I've had them backfire.
You've got to make sure you know what you're doing. And above all, if you are going to use a cross with the figure of have one with the figure of Christ, otherwise it's just a symbol of torture. I've worked with deliverance teams all over the UK over the years. Make sure that you don't just carry that cross. If you're going to use it, you've got to believe in it.
You've got to believe in it.
Because if you ain't got that faith, that's a piece of wood with a figure on it.
It's like that. It's like that movie. It's like the movie in it where it's the vampire and he says you've got to have faith.
Yep.
And the cross. Yeah. For it to work.
Even if it's just for that moment, flip's sake, have the faith. I'm not trying to convert all the audience.
I'm going on to Amazon to buy one.
Believe you me, I've talked to many an old soldier and they'll tell you I didn't believe in God before the war, but my God, I do now.
It's terrifying. It really is. These entities that are out among us.
You need to be aware that if you are a paranormal researcher, you are dealing with forces that are beyond our comprehension.
Yes.
All we can do is try and protect ourselves and those around us. And it takes the exorcists and those that are genuinely qualified. Genuinely, don't mess around with it. Because you can open a door very easily to the spirit world and let anything in. Not just spirits, but dark entities. It's shutting that door. You have to be able to do too. So if you run out of the room going, you're leaving the door open.
Yeah, I mean, when I go to like places and that, I do a wee prayer before I go in. And when I come out, I always lay down my rules. I do another wee prayer, and then I lay down the rules and say, you can't cross me. You can't follow me. You're not allowed to. And it is weird because when you get like beyond the boundary point, you feel a difference. It's as if they can't follow you. But I've had friends that have had things follow them home because they've done it wrong. They've went to a location like a graveyard or something like that where satanic works maybe happened, and they've went in there and they've tried to piss off whatever it is in there, and then they've not done any prayers, they've not done any stuff. They've went home and then their house is haunted by something dark.
Oh yeah, it could come back with an attachment. What I would say is if you have a sort of qualm about faith, you shouldn't, because it's not going to hurt you. Good, healthy faith doesn't do anybody any harm. But what I would say, look, come on. If you really do have difficulty believing, that's okay. Go and see a priest or go to one of these nice shrines. Get yourself a little bit of holy water. All right? Get some holy water. Get a little pack of holy wafers. Get them blessed properly. Put them in a container so that it's all nice. And then do you know what? If you got something nasty going on, we used to have it used to be called an aftershave called Brute 33, and they used to say, splash it all over. Do you know what? Splash it all over. For that moment, have some faith in what you're using there. Splash it all over. You protect yourself. There you go. It can't do too much harm, to be honest.
No. Dakota, would you like to say anything before the end of the hour?
Nah, just you start talking to demons. I'm just like, hey, God, I hope somebody doesn't try anything stupid. Because I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'7", almost 400 pounds. I had an incident where one jumped me at home, pinned me to the wall like I was just a rag doll, and started trying to choke me to death. That took one hell of a fight, and the next morning my neighbors came over wondering if my cats were okay because they could hear what sounded like animals squealing when that happened.
Yeah, I mean,
nevertheless,
I hope I never encounter one. I probably will one day when I'm marching through a castle somewhere. I'll encounter just a pissed off. Hopefully, it's just a pissed off ghost or something like that. It's not. I know that demons are rare. They're rare, and
protect yourself.
I was just going to say, yes, protect yourself. And see, that's the problem nowadays with the younger generation. They think it's cool to go into a graveyard with a Ouija board. See, that's I've seen it, and I thought to myself, like,
We all have, and I just say, guys, just don't. Just.
Yeah.
I know it's like a game to them, but it's free choice. But do you know the reason why Dracula could have done so very well in the modern world is because the modern world didn't know how to get rid of Dracula. You had to get specialists from away that knew how to deal with him. Otherwise, look, the rampage he could have taken over. So it's up to folks. Do you believe in ghosts enough to believe they really exist? And if you believe that they exist, you must know how to deal with the paranormal in the best and safest ways that we can.
Yeah. Well, I would like to thank Neil for coming on tonight. Honestly, it's been an absolute brilliant show. We'll talk to you after the end this year. And everybody that's watched this, please, Neil, have you got links that you would like to give out? We'll link everything to your books and stuff, but do you have any like Twitter accounts or stuff? You want to give yourself a plug?
If you want to be a friend on Facebook, if you've got a genuine interest in the paranormal, if you are kind, if you are genuine, if you are respectful to other people, then you're welcome to be a Facebook friend. There we are. You can find me there, or look up my publishers, Pen and Sword Books, History Press. They're all there as well, you know. But no, I'm very simple.
We'll supply the links below this video once it's uploaded, guys. So, guys, I hope you all have a brilliant week, and thank you for watching the show.
Bye-bye.